Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are here to give you that ultimate shortcut to being well-informed. We take stacks of articles, all this research, and we boil it all down to the essential game-changing insights. Today, we're jumping into the global financial system, and we're really tackling one central question. How has big data completely reshaped financial institutions all over the world?
It really has.
Our mission here is pretty simple. We're going to analyze all the source material we have and try to figure out the true scope of this tech revolution. And the core insight that just keeps jumping out from all the data is that the very definition of financial intelligence has changed. I mean, we're seeing this massive shift away from decisions based on limited old historical data sets.
Exactly. Retrospective data.
Towards this dynamic real-time insight that's pulled from all these diverse and often, unstructured sources. Think of it like this. Traditional finance was basically like driving a car only using the rearview mirror. You knew exactly where you'd been. Modern finance, powered by big data, it's more like a real-time 360-degree radar system. And it has predictive modeling built in, so it's forecasting traffic 2 miles ahead. The speed, the scope, it's what underpins all of modern banking and really the entire FinTech sector.
And that very infrastructure, that reliance on these incredibly complex data pipelines and automated models, it means the stakes they've never been higher.
Right.
Big data is, without a doubt, this powerful enabler. It drives efficiency, hyper-personalization, competitiveness. But, and this is the key thing, it's also a source of new, very complex systemic risk.
So it's a balancing act.
It is. Our focus today has to be on balancing that huge potential with the inherent limitations and vulnerabilities that this whole shift has introduced.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's start where a lot of these strategies really began, which is the U.S. experience.
Right.
For years, financial decisions in the U.S., they relied on these established metrics, right, like static credit scores.
Right.
How did big data become so central to decision-making over there?
Well, the shift in the U.S. has been aggressive. It's really driven by just intense competition. You have both the established megabanks and the fintech disruptors, all using massive scale analytics for all their core functions.
So things like credit risk.
Credit risk is the big one.
Yeah.
Decisions are no longer just based on a few traditional credit reports. Now they're using these really sophisticated models to pull in and analyze transaction histories, behavioral data, even, digital engagement patterns.
You mentioned optimizing pricing and personalizing services. What does that actually look like for, say, a regular person with a bank account?
It means we're moving away from a fixed menu of options. Here are our 3 loan rates.
Yeah.
Big data lets a lender continuously monitor a customer's economic activity.
Yeah, everything they do.
Pretty much. Their transaction speed, their savings habits, how they responded to a previous offer. And they can dynamically adjust the loan rate offered to them in real time, or even predict which investment product they're probably going to want next. The goal is always maximum conversion, minimal risk.
That speed is incredible, but it really sounds like we've traded these sort of periodic, manageable risks for something that's high frequency and maybe dangerously interconnected.
That's an excellent way to put it. It really captures the change in the decision cycles. Traditional decisions were based on, monthly reports, quarterly analysis. It was all retrospective.
Looking back.
Always looking back. Now we have continuous monitoring. We have automated models that can execute trades or approve a loan in milliseconds based on all these shifting variables. And that speed, it makes institutions way more efficient, but it also means that errors can propagate much, much faster.
Okay, so if the U.S. model is all about speed, competition, and optimizing for profit, our sources really highlight a different focus when we look at the U.K. How does their adoption of big data differ?
The U.K. approach is, it's heavily shaped by its regulatory environment. There's this intense focus on data protection, on governance, and on accountability.
So it's not a free-for-all.
Not at all. Firms operating there have to not only use big data for risk management and compliance, but they also have to demonstrate these robust, auditable controls over how that data is sourced, how it's stored, and how it's used.
So you can't just have a good outcome. You have to show your work.
You have to show all of your work. Institutions have to prove where their data came from, how they got consent, and they have to guarantee its quality. Data is seen as a strategic asset, yes, but it's an asset that comes with this huge regulatory responsibility.
That distinction, asset versus liability, that feels critical.
It is.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of risk. Big data has totally altered risk assessment. What was the the core weakness of those old traditional models, and what new types of data are being pulled in now?
The traditional models, they just suffered from a really limited field of vision. They were built on small data sets, historical loan performance, public stats, and they relied on these very static manual assumptions.
So they were slow.
They were very slow to react to anything new, anything unprecedented, because those events just weren't in their training data. The modern approach is fundamentally different because it incorporates a massive range of structured data, like transaction histories. But, crucially, it also pulls in huge amounts of unstructured information.
Okay, unstructured data is a key term here. Can you give us some concrete examples? What are these models actually ingesting now?
Sure. We're talking about things like analyzing social media sentiment to try and predict consumer confidence. That's a signal that a quarterly report would never capture.
Wow.
It includes using satellite imagery to forecast industrial output or track supply chain problems before they ever hit a public filing. It's customer interaction logs, transcripts from call centers, even geolocation data showing where people shop.
So the models are just smarter.
They're immensely smarter. The predictive accuracy is so much better. But this complexity, it introduces a profound inherent fragility that just didn't exist in the simpler systems.
Tell us more about that fragility, that structural weakness. Where does the major vulnerability actually lie?
It lies in the propagation of errors and the speed. When you have errors in data quality, what some people call data poisoning, where bad info corrupts the input, or even more critically, when an assumption in the analytical model itself is flawed, that error gets scaled instantly across every single transaction the algorithm touches.
I see.
In the old world of manual review and small data, an error might affect one transaction, one report. In the big data world, where everything is automated and connected, a single misjudgment based on flawed data can become a widespread systemic problem in a flash.
Across thousands of accounts.
For market positions, yes. We're basically trading lower frequency, manageable risks for these higher speed, interconnected flash risks.
Which means understanding this vulnerability is absolutely crucial for anyone who relies on these systems. Better predictive accuracy doesn't mean you're immune to failure.
Not at all.
It just changes the nature of the failure when it happens, makes it faster, broader.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's zoom out now and see how this whole revolution is playing out across the globe. We've talked about the U.S. focus on competition, the U.K. on governance. But how is big data being applied beyond those centers?
It's fascinating because you see a world of different approaches. If you look at China, for instance, you see systems operating on a truly massive scale. Big data is used extensively within these vast integrated digital finance ecosystems.
Integrated how?
They seamlessly bring together services that were traditionally separate. Payments, lending, insurance, consumer credit. It's all on one platform.
And the scale is just enormous.
Unparalleled. These systems use these huge data sets to build holistic digital profiles for risk assessment. For example, our sources note that credit scores there can rely heavily on social behavior metrics or purchasing patterns from across the entire ecosystem.
So they're directly linking your lending risk to your daily personal activity.
Yes, that ability to collect, integrate, and process information across those previously separate silos. That is the key differentiator in China's market. It shows the maximum power of data-driven finance.
Then we shift to, say, Canada, and our sources suggest a much more measured approach.
Very much so. Canada's large banks are known for being stable, conservative. Their focus has really been on balancing innovation with strict accountability.
So what are they using analytics for?
Primarily to enhance their own institutional resilience. They're monitoring operational risk, running sophisticated models to...
That's a sharp contrast to the aggressive integration in China. But I think for the learner listening now, maybe the most powerful example of big data creating real-world change is in Southeast Asia. This is where it's solving a really foundational problem, financial inclusion.
It absolutely is. This is a huge aha moment. In many parts of Southeast Asia, big data is being used to assess people who completely lack a formal credit history.
Right, people who are locked out of the system.
Exactly. They don't have a FICO score, no established bank record.
Yeah.
So fintech platforms are stepping in. They analyze transaction data and digital behavior, things like mobile phone usage, utility payments, or even income streams they can see through digital wallets.
So they're building a credit history from scratch.
They're building a new, accessible form of trust based on a person's digital footprint. This alternative data allows them to construct a really effective assessment of creditworthiness.
So it's not just about optimizing for existing customers, it's about actually expanding the customer base by giving credit to people who were previously invisible to the system.
That's it. It shows the immense social potential here, expanding access to financial services. But it also reinforces that universal need for rigorous data quality and ethical oversight, because for these new customers, that digital footprint is often the only record they have.
Okay, so as fascinating as these regional applications are, we have to address the bigger picture. The source material points to systemic considerations, right? Moving beyond just one institution's efficiency and into market stability itself. What is the greatest systemic risk here?
The primary risk is something called correlated decision-making. It's a technical concept, but it's absolutely critical to understand.
Okay.
As more and more financial institutions globally start to rely on the same handful of analytical software vendors, train their models on similar public data sets, and react to the same real-time signals, their automated systems all start to reach similar conclusions at the same time.
You mean every algorithm decides to hit the sell button at the exact same moment?
Functionally, yes. During periods of market stress, this correlation risk can be catastrophic. Instead of institutions acting independently and, maybe mitigating volatility, the homogeneity of the data and the models means the collective response is amplified.
So the tool designed to optimize the market actually ends up breaking it.
It can amplify volatility instead of taming it. It could lead to flash crashes or widespread liquidity crises, especially in these highly interconnected digital markets.
It sounds like we're embedding the risk into the very foundation of the system, which I imagine necessitates incredibly robust governance. What are the key things institutions have to manage now?
Governance has become the central challenge. They have to actively manage the entire data lifecycle, making sure ownership is clear, validating that they have explicit consent, maintaining state-of-the-art security, and constantly auditing the quality of the data going in.
So the regulators expect more now.
Much more. They expect institutions to demonstrate not just technical skill, but clear accountability for every single outcome. You have to be able to trace any decision back to its source data and its algorithmic logic.
Which brings up the black box problem. If an algorithm makes a decision that impacts a customer, how do you even audit that?
And that's the final critical governance requirement. Decisions have to be explainable, they have to be auditable, and they must be capable of being challenged. Institutions need to adopt tools that ensure algorithmic transparency. They need to be able to show the reasoning, what weight was assigned to different inputs, and how the outcome would have changed with different data.
So if you're denied credit, they have to give you a real reason.
They have to be able to pull up an understandable explanation for that refusal, proving the decision was sound and critically non-discriminatory.
That sums up our deep dive perfectly. Big data is this powerful, disruptive shift. It enables rapid, real-time insights in completely different markets, from, optimizing pricing in the hyper-competitive U.S. to driving essential financial inclusion in Southeast Asia.
The core message for you, the learner, has to be this. Big data is a phenomenal, necessary enabler, but it is not a substitute for sound human judgment and rigorous controls. Its true value is only realized when those insights are consistently interpreted and applied within strong ethical and regulatory frameworks.
So considering this very powerful risk of correlated decision-making, where almost every major financial actor is using the same automated tools to make split-second choices, how might human judgment need to evolve to act as the necessary counterbalance? The crucial circuit breaker during the next major market crisis. That's something for you to mull over. We'll see you next time.